Welcome to Informal Talks, the podcast where we'll be chatting about informality. This initiative is part of the European project INSEI, led by Universidad Autónoma de Madrid, which brings together researchers, institutions, businesses, and social actors from Europe and Latin America to rethink informality in today's world. Join us on the other path.
So, Anna, thank you very much for being available for us, for INSEI, the International Network for the Socio-Economic Analysis of Informality. So it's an international network of researchers who do research on the phenomenon of informal labor markets, informal economy, informal markets in general. So thank you very much for being available for us. My name is Matthias Schulze-Böing. I work for GEWAK, which is part of the INSEI network. And maybe you can introduce yourself a bit, and then we will move over to your work and to your actual current activities. Anna.
Thank you very much for the invitation. So my name is Anna Weirich. Currently I am a counselor for labor right at the counselling or advisory network Faire Mobilität, about which we will speak later on. And I give advice in Romanian and Russian, and I'm our network specialist for truck drivers, international road transport. I've been doing this since 2020, so for the last 5.5 years now.
So you are a member of the Faire Mobilität initiative of the German Federation of Unions. And so maybe you can tell us something how it came about that Faire Mobilität started to work. When did it start to work, and what are the objectives and the aims of Faire Mobilität?
So Faire Mobilität, or Faire Mobility in English, is a network of advisory centers. Currently we have 12 advisory centers all over Germany. And it has all started in 2011, at that point with fewer counselors, advisors and advisory centers, and it has constantly became bigger with more counselors and so on. We provide advice to EU citizens mainly. And we also have a focus on posting, and it can happen that we give advice also to third country nationals who are posted to Germany, so who have a labor contract in another EU country and come to Germany. And our task is to give advice free of charge, confidential, and in several languages. So
are they labor union members?
No. No, they are not. They are not. Faire Mobilität has been founded by the German Trade Confederation, Trade Unions Confederation, DGB, Deutscher Gewerkschaftsbund, exactly to fill this gap, because workers who come from another country to work in Germany on a temporary basis are not do not typically become member of a labor union, but how do they get legal advice, and who can help them to represent their own interests? So the DGB understood that here is a gap in that the existing labor unions struggle to fill. So they came up with the idea of this network of advisory centers which can give advice free of charge, independent of a union membership, and in different languages. So all of our advisors speak, apart from English and German, at least one EU language, preponderantly from Eastern Europe. So Polish and Romanian are our most important languages, but we also have colleagues who speak Czech, Hungarian, Croatian, and other languages, Bulgarian.
And what was the motivation for DGB to start an initiative addressing non-union members?
I wasn't a member of Faire Mobilität at that time, so I joined later. I wasn't part of all these discussions, but obviously with the EU enlargement, because when it started in 2010 till 2011, that was when first Poland and a little bit later Romania, or Polish and Romanian citizens gained access to the labor market. Because at that point, both countries had been members of the European Union for 7 years, but Germany had restricted access to the labor market for the longest possible period of 7 years. So that was the moment when these people, these European co-citizens, workers, had the possibility to start working in Germany, and I think everyone who knows about how labor market works understood that this would be taken advantage of, and probably that these people, if they didn't have the appropriate information and support in struggling for their rights, would face eventually massive exploitation, which is the case up until today, but at least there are possibilities to assist them.
And where did those people work? Was it informal labor markets, informal work, or did they work in the formal labor market?
Both, but I think if we speak about informality in Germany, we have to think about types that are half informal. So very often people have a labor contract with a German company, with a German employer, so they are not working completely in a completely undocumented manner, but parts of it will be informal. Either if it's about posting, then either parts of the labor relation are not 100% legal, but in a way informal, but especially, and this is probably the most important things, not the whole amount of labor is being formalized and remunerated. So first of all the people who come to our advisory centers struggle with the fact that they work more than they are being paid for, but also not so rare that part of the payments are done unofficially, very often without the people understanding this. And then if we look at their documentation, then we find out, okay, but your employer has paid only for half of the amount of working time, social contributions. So these are forms that are half formal, half informal. Of course, also in Germany, there are people who are working in completely informal manners, but to be honest, we're an advisory center for labor rights, and if labor right is completely ignored, then it's also difficult to give advice.
Okay.
But yes, of course, it exists. In certain kinds of jobs, it of course exists that people work 100% informal, but the most typical situation in Germany is arrangements that are half formal, half informal.
Okay. Maybe we can now move on to a bit more specific. How is Faire Mobility working? How are your clients accessing you? How did you get in touch? Do you get in touch with them? And how do you work? Maybe you can give us a practical example, or maybe tell us a bit about your day-to-day working reality.
So the core of our work is of course counselling. That is, people contact us via email, via telephone, and they have either just a question about labor law in Germany, or most often they have some kind of problem. Most often that has got to do with payment of salaries, non-payment, missing salaries. And then they call us or send us emails, and we start first of all to elaborate the situation, to understand what is really the problem, what is going on, and then depending on the case and on the person, either give simply information and advice, or if they want this and we find that it can be useful, it's also possible that we help them draft whatever letters, get into contact with the employer, or get information from other institutions like the health insurance or the pension fund, or and it happens that one case is be dealt with in like a 15-minute phone call, but I have cases. And right now, I just closed the case that I have been working on for over a year.
Okay.
But now, unfortunately, unsolved case. Now we really did everything that we could do out of court. That is important. We are not lawyers, or some of my colleagues are lawyers, but within Faire Mobilität we don't act as lawyers. So we do not represent people at court. If of course, we explain them how this works, and sometimes tell them that is the best way or maybe the only remaining possibility. But if people decide they want to go to court, they want to file charges, they have either got to do it on their own or they have to find a lawyer. We explain them how it works, but we do not file the charges for them, and we do not represent them in court. So we help with information and advice out of court. And for example, if there's a problem with an employer and the employer is ready to speak, to solve it, then we can assist with that. But if the solution is court, then this is the next step beyond our counselling. So that is the core of our work. And you asked me, how do people find us? Via different channels. So first of all, people just Google it, or nowadays, and I feel that we are being found ever more because of artificial intelligence. So I think people just tell one of the artificial intelligence machines, I have this and that problem, what shall I do? And obviously that thing tells them, please call Anna, if it's a truck driver at least, or call Faire Mobilität or whatever. So this happens, people have told me. But also we have Facebook pages for workers in our most important language of advice. So of course people are part of these groups on ours from Facebook. We don't counsel on Facebook, but of course they find our contacts on Facebook and they find information on Facebook. Very much also colleagues forward them our contact. So very often people tell us, someone gave me a number. In that case, sometimes they do not even really know who we are. They just know the number, and we explain them what we can do and what we cannot do. And we also, from time to time, go out on the streets or to companies or to working places where we know that we find our target group, and we speak to them directly. Like now is the season in the agriculture where asparagus and strawberries are being collected. So we have been already 3 times this year on different fields where asparagus pickers, mostly Romanian, we have been speaking to them and distributed our leaflets. But we also go to truck stops, speak to truck drivers, into industrial zones. We go to logistics companies where delivery workers pick up the parcels that they then distribute in the city, and so on and so on.
You told me that you speak Romanian. And another
And
language
Russian,
from immigrants. So
Yes.
is this important in your work, to address them, to be able to address those clients in their
Of
native
course,
language? Yeah.
of course, because the majority of people who do contact us have limited knowledge of German or very often no knowledge of German at all.
Okay.
Because these industries that recruit these people abroad who then end up in our consultation, very often the whole work functions in their own language because they have recruiters who speak the same language. Maybe the team leader speaks the same language. So maybe even the boss, or they hired people who know these languages. For truck drivers, very often dispatchers speak that language, or Russian as a language of communication. So the whole work is organized in a way that these people do not necessarily need German in order to do the work, to fulfill the work. But at the same time, of course, the absence of knowledge of German is being used against them in order to exploit them. So, for example, the labor contract, I mean, many people do not even get a labor contract, but let's say they get a labor contract. Of course, one of our requests would be, it should be in 2 languages. A language, well, maybe the official language, German, okay, but then a translation into the language that the worker understands. But very often that is not the case. So these people sign a contract and they do not understand what they sign. And since we are speaking of informality, so for me this is already a step towards informality, because okay, you have formality, but not in the sense that the involved parties understand this formality. And very often you also have deals and verbal agreements that are completely different from the paper reality, especially in road transport. You have a kind of formality. All these drivers have loads of documents, but they do not know what they represent, and what is written in them has got nothing to do with what they agreed with their boss and what they expect from this job. So there is an informal component to all of this.
So to say, ecosystems of precariousness, which reduces precariousness, disadvantages.
And of course, since you ask about language, then it is our deal, our job, to help them analyze the documents, to explain it in their own language, to also explain labor law in their language. And this is translating, but not only between German and, for example, Romanian in my case, it is also translating between different registers and degrees of formality, because, I mean, even in Germany and in German, not everyone understands their labor contract on their own, even if they understand the language. So it is also about explaining what does this mean, and also translating it sometimes into another legal system, because maybe these guys have knowledge about how labor market and labor law works in their country, and they assume it is the same in Germany. For example, this is an example from today. I was speaking to a Lithuanian truck driver, so I don't speak Lithuanian, but we communicate in Russian. And his problem is, he's working for a very bad employer, very bad company that we know very well, and he wants to leave this job. But he thinks he needs the official agreement of his employer to leave the job. And there are countries where this works. As long as you have an employment contract, you need to agree that you ended. But in Germany, that is not the case. You need to respect the term, and you have to do it in written, but you can dismiss. And he felt trapped in this job, And it took me a while to understand that this is his problem.
Okay.
That he just didn't realize, of course he can. So I helped him now to write his formal dismissal and explained him how he needs to do it so that it's legally valid and that he does not encounter any extra problems because of some mistakes. And to leave this horrible employer. And here the translation is also between legal systems and understanding how does it work here, and not everything that I take for granted is the same. So you asked me whether we cooperate with local institutions, authorities, and so on. Yes, we do. But what does cooperation mean? So, of course, the interest and the aims of our and the well-being of the advice seekers is always the priority. So, if an advice seeker, for example, is interested in passing on certain information to authorities, let's say classically the German customs, the Zoll, who, for example, enforces or
who in Germany are in charge of supervising this part of the labor market and the economy,
Exactly. For example, the non-payment of the minimum wage or illegal work and so on. And sometimes, if workers wish to tell them about their working conditions, then of course we explain them how they can do this, what it means for them. If they want, we can help them make the appointment and so on. So this is not cooperation in the closest sense of the word, but we are in touch with authorities a lot. Of course, if our advice seekers get letters from the health insurance or for the agency of unemployment, we help them to understand these letters, and we give them some idea of how they can react to that or what it means for them, and so on. But we are always we're always with the advice seekers. So
And is there any strategic approach with Faire Mobilität or even the German Federation of Unions towards these informal or precarious labor markets? Is there an overarching strategy to tackle these problems?
Well, yes and no. So first of all, we as advisory network, our task is to give information and counselling to workers.
On a case-to-case basis.
Yes. And of course we have strategies of how we do that. And for sectors, for our core sectors, where we have coordinators, we also have a strategy in the sense of how do we, so for example in my case of truck drivers, how do we approach drivers when we go to a parking lot on the motorway to speak to drivers? Which message do we want to pass on them? Of course we're in exchange with labor unions and other actors who are active.
So the specific sectorial labor unions which are responsible for this part of the economy. For instance, the Union of Transport and Public Services,
exactly.
Construction Workers Union, so which
yes.
are under the umbrella of the German Federation of Unions.
But the picture has become more heterogeneous because of questions of compliance, and the German compliance law, very long term in German, Lieferketten-Sorgfaltspflichten Gesetz, so the law on supply chains. Because here big companies that have more than 1,000 employees in Germany have responsibilities for their whole supply chain and not only for their own company. And then of course this is cross-sectoral because on the one hand, for example, you have to do with road transport and a truck driver, but he has been driving car parts for the automobile industry or for supermarkets. And then, of course, we also, if we have bigger problems related to that, we also exchange with the metal workers union, because companies that are typically organized by IG Metall also have to do with these.
Metal workers union,
Yeah.
So do you try to make those clients members of unions? Is that part of your work and your understanding of your work?
No, because that's the union's jobs.
Okay.
So of course, so we inform these workers. If they tell us they want to become a member of a union and they are struggling with the information they find on the internet or whatever, we are happy to explain them what a union is, how it works in Germany, and what their possibilities are, and help them. That is no problem. But we will not tell them. That
it's not your mission to.
No, it's not our job. So that's organizing of members is the labor unions.
That's
and of course we exchange with labor unions on that, because we know these workers and we know what their problems are. So we're exchange with the labor unions on that, and that can help them to find strategies for organizing these workers if they want. But we will not recruit members for the labor unions.
Okay. And what, Anna, what would you regard as your most important achievement over the last years of your work? Is there something which you mention?
Yes, I mean, of course, there are always important cases. I mean, every time a worker gets his or her right, that's an achievement. And if you look into the international road transport, I would say the working conditions in the sector are horrible, really catastrophic, with a lot of human rights abuses. But that has been the case for a long time, and I feel public awareness about this has changed. The working conditions have not changed, so that's a small achievement, but public awareness about this has changed. So nowadays it's easier than maybe 3 years ago to speak about this, because people have heard about it, and you do not start from zero, but maybe. And I think this has got also to do with our work, so I would say that's maybe at least partially our achievement that...
The problem is still there, and it has not really improved, but the public mindset towards these problems has improved, and so it's maybe easier for you to intervene and to make clients of those companies sensitive towards these problems. So there's an impact, a societal impact. And what would you think of the most important obstacles for your work? Are there some obstacles for your work to overcome? Or?
Yes, of course there are a lot of obstacles. So there is, I mean, on the one hand, employers are very inventive to find ways of exploiting workers, to lure them into the jobs and then keep them on the job. And also to prepare themselves against possible claims, especially in the trucking sector. Companies are very good at creating a paper reality that protects them from any claims, and if then the workers are not as well prepared, and of course they are not, it's very difficult to attack this. So this is a huge problem. On the day-to-day level in the working conditions. I would also say it's an obstacle that many law breaches exist, but I have the feeling very few of them are being discovered and have consequences. So unfortunately, it seems to be the case, at least in certain areas of work, that employers know they can risk to breach the law because it's not extremely probable that this will be that this will have consequences. So better enforcement, more intensive enforcement would of course be helpful.
So this is maybe a recommendation towards the lawmaker or towards public authorities. Are there any failures, any lacks of action on this side? Or is it
So
okay? So they should be more active in going after these these problems. Okay, Anna, thank you very much. This was very informative, and all the best for your future work.
Thank you very much. You too.
Bye.
That's all for now from Informal Talks, the podcast from the European project INSEAI. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our next episodes. This episode was brought to you by Adrián García Cuadrado and Pablo García León on technical support, and Nuria Laguna, Esther Alarcón, and Laura Vidal on production. And remember, be formal or not, we've got you covered.